to this installment of the NIA Member Spotlight series, where we interview a different member every month to learn a little more about their activities in the world of nano. And for this installment, we sat down with Landon Mertz, who's the CEO of Cerion Nanomaterials and also the chair of the NIA Board of Directors. Landon, welcome.
Hey there, Chiara.
Good. So, Landon, as you know, the Member Spotlight series does not necessarily address only the nano public, but it's accessible to everyone who is a member of the NIA community. So perhaps we can start by learning a little more about Cerion Nanomaterials, and if you could talk us through what the company does.
Yeah, absolutely. So Cerion Nanomaterials has been around for, we're going on 15 years, and we're one of the leaders here in the United States for both the design, the scale up, and the manufacturing of nanomaterials. As a company, we're primarily focused on metal oxides, and ceramic nanoparticles. That tends to be the bulk of the market today. And our customers are mostly based in the US and the EU. I'd say overwhelmingly, they're mid-cap, large-cap companies, often multinationals. And as a business, we support customers across, broadly speaking, 40 different industries and countless number of products. Most of our customers, I would say, would be defined as either industrial, life sciences, or in the defense industries.
And one other thing is that there are different approaches to the manufacturing of nanomaterials. So can you tell us a little more about the approach that Cerion chose and why you decided to go in that direction?
Yeah, as a business model, 15 years ago, we struck off in a different direction from our peers. And most companies in nanomaterials are designing materials specifically to solve an industrial challenge. And that's not a bad thing, but that's not our focus. What we do is we provide companies who are developing products that leverage nanomaterials with advanced expertise in the design, the scale up, and the manufacturing of those materials. So when you think about our relationship with a customer, we tend to serve as the subject matter experts for the design, scale up, and manufacturing of the nanomaterial. The customer serves as the subject matter expert in their industry, their customers, and their products. And so we support those customers from applied research all the way through to manufacturing. And importantly, we don't develop products, so we never compete with customers. In terms of approaches, we started out with precipitation technology. This was a technology that was created at Kodak, which we heavily invested to bring it well beyond its current state of the art. But over the years, we've actually increased our synthesis capability to include things like hydrosolvothermal, high temperature processes. We've done work in ion exchange. And the whole reason for doing that was to be able to provide the customer the exact right technical solution and manufacturing solution that meets their cost requirements. One particular synthesis method will never cover all types of material synthesis and manufacturing.
You mentioned applied research, and one of the key aspects of successful technology evolution and transfer is the need for researchers on the one hand and industry on the other hand to understand each other's needs and to be informed of what each of them is doing. So what kind of approach does Cerion have to the integration of R&D into the manufacturing process?
Yeah, so moving out of the lab and into the production environment is our specialty. 15 years ago, what we did is we developed a process that we called design for manufacturing. And what we're doing here is we're actually working from day one in the lab to ensure the materials we design today can be manufactured tomorrow, and most importantly, that it's done cost effectively. So it's a proprietary process, but at a high level, our chemical engineering teams are actually embedded with our researchers, and what they're looking to do is ensure as a researcher is creating a synthetic approach or a formula in the lab, that it's going to fit within certain parameters that we know scale well into manufacturing environments. But it's really a whole of company approach, because our purchasing teams will do things like work up raw material cost analysis at various scales. Our business analysts will do manufacturing price simulations at various scales. And it's a real iterative process that happens throughout the entire life of the program, in the lab all the way through to commercialization.
Now, you were mentioning you have customers both in North America and Europe. One of the recent NIA Nano in Business webinars actually looked at global trade. And the fact that it seems, one thing we discussed a lot was that it seems we're really going into a bit of a period of crisis for global trade. And so I was wondering, in terms of like global markets and the opportunities and challenges, what do you see as like key priority areas that companies should keep in mind?
Yeah, so with dramatic pressures being caused by population increases, especially over the next 50 years, I still prescribe to this notion that society has 6 macro challenges it needs to address. And ultimately, I think that those macro trends become, the things that are going to drive or force innovation in the market. Broadly speaking, I would say that that's energy, food, cities, human health, raw materials, water and air. And in terms of applications, I think we could talk about this all day long. So just to use a few examples, you look at energy density for storage devices, batteries is going to be kind of a key area that I think we're going to need to address. The thermal management of buildings, lightweighting of automotive and aerospace components. Ultimately in energy, this is all about efficiency and productivity, being able to get more with every dollar that you invest. And then if you look at things like cities, corrosion prevention has been an issue for the centuries. Globally, it's a $3 trillion drag on the economy. And so that is an area where we're going to have significant innovation. Something like cement, doing more with less, or decreasing the degradation process over the years so that you get a longer lived asset. But material science really has been the pillar of innovation throughout the centuries. From my perspective, it's advanced our societies, it's improved our lives, it's kept us safe. And so there's no doubt from my perspective that materials, broadly speaking, and then nanomaterials specifically will play a role in addressing those kind of 6 key macro trends.
And I think that is one of the fascinating things about nanotechnology, like the versatility of the applications. And as you know, in the NIA membership, we have a lot of different industry players. We have research institutes and universities. We have service providers. And of course, since September of 2020, you are the chair of the NIA board. So can you tell us a little more about your priorities for the association?
From my perspective, there are 2 macro goals. The first is I really am passionate about what the NIA has done over the last 15 years, and I really do believe over the next 10 years, it has a key opportunity to become the global industry trade group and voice for the nanomaterials community. And that spans a whole number of dimensions, commercial, technical, health and safety, environmental, even regulatory, which NIA is doing, then of course public affairs. The other thing is I would love to see the NIA expand from a EU-centric operation to one that also incorporates the US, because I really do believe that our industry, while we may have different priorities in the EU and the US, that we do need to speak with a common voice.
Our homework ready. That's great. So the last question in the member spotlight series is usually a no-nano question. So I know you're passionate about macroeconomics. So I was wondering what kind of, what do you see ahead for the global community?
Yeah, from my perspective, we live in very interesting times. When you look at a reserve currency and you look back at different empires, and we're talking going back hundreds of years, you see very distinct patterns. And usually this starts with periods of boom bust. We'll call this the short-term debt cycle. Each phase of that short-term debt cycle usually lasts around 10 years, or 20 in total. And usually they're punctuated by periods of income growth, followed by debts rising faster than incomes, and then deleveraging occurs in the economy, what we would all call a recession. And at that point, usually central banks step in, both with monetary policy and monetary expansion, and then governments do the same with fiscal policy. And in essence, what we're doing is we're papering over the cracks to keep driving down the road. And on top of these short-term debt cycles, we have a long-term debt cycle. And this is not a hard and fast rule, but typically the long-term debt cycle is comprised of about 4 short-term debt cycles, and they can last anywhere from 80 to 100 years. The last one that occurred was in the 1930s here in the US. And during that time, the percentage of debt to GDP was about 250%. Today in the US, including the COVID impacts, our debt is reaching a GDP of nearly 300%. And what happens in a long-term debt cycle is you get to the end of it, and both the government and the central bank really have very little capacity to intervene in the market. And so what you get is an extremely significant market correction at the end of that long-term cycle. And this is nothing special to the US. This has been happening for thousands of years, going all the way back to Roman times. More recently, you might look at the Dutch Empire or the British Empire. But the big takeaway from my perspective is we're somewhere in that 4th cycle here in the US. And what happens in the US will absolutely ripple through the global economy. And so when I think about the nanomaterials community, I would just say, you need to be prepared for this. You need to manage your corporate debt wisely. This is typically where a lot of companies get in trouble. And you also have to realize that, debt is in essence borrowing money today at the expense of money you're going to generate tomorrow. So that slows economic growth. And you can see that already across pretty much all of the global economy. We're having growth of maybe 1-2%, excluding China. So you have to factor that into your overall long-term planning as well. But it's indeed an interesting time. I mean, we will be a generation that sees this, what they call the 4th turning, probably in the next 10, 20 years, if I had to guess.
I think there is a reason if in ancient times, may you live in interesting times was considered a curse. So we'll see where that goes. But thanks a lot for being with us today, Landon. The NIA Member Spotlight series is, as I mentioned at the beginning, available to the general public. If you don't receive the NIA newsletter yet, you can register on our website, and you can also join our community on LinkedIn to stay up to speed on everything nano. Thank you, and speak soon.